For over 1,000 years, the Egyptians traded with Punt. Punt had gold, it had ivory, it had a bunch of valuable resources that was highly desired by the Egyptians and its neighbors. So, where is Punt? Or where was Punt? Well, we have guesses. It was probably somewhere around Eritrea or Eastern Sudan. But we don't actually know where it is because no one bothered writing it down. Everyone just thought it was common sense regarding where Punt was, and it is especially crazy that we don't know exactly where it was because it's not like the Egyptians just traded with Punt for a few short years. Egypt traded with Punt for over 1,000 years. And this is not anything new in history. There have been so many things that we don't know about to this day, from common recipes people thought was obvious to make or honestly not important enough to write down and therefore didn't write it down, to the daily life and habits of the ordinary person, which again, those who could write thought it wasn't worth the time to record. And that is what this video is about. I am somewhere in my mid-20s, I'll leave it at that. I know some younger people can't wait to call me Unk and set explosives underneath my car, but in all seriousness, I know I am still young, but as I am getting older, there have most definitely been changes from back when I was a child, and specifically, this video is about what life was like before smartphones were common. So, Happy New Year's to you watching this, and I really hope you had a good one, and I also apologize in advance if I sound a little different as I am also a little sick. And what better way to celebrate another year closer to our deaths than to reminisce about a time many moons ago. A time when we used VHS tapes that had to be rewound, a time when we used payphones, and a time where there were no smartphones. This is documenting my experience for future historians. This is life before smartphones. I got my first smartphone, which was an iPhone 6, in the winter of my sophomore year of high school. Yes, I essentially went through half of high school with no phone, not even a flip phone. In fact, there was a time when I asked a girl out back in high school and she asked to exchange numbers, but since my ass didn't have a phone back then, I gave her my Yahoo email, not even a Gmail. And let's just say it's one of those memories that you think about when you're laying in bed that causes you to contemplate taking a sleeping pill flavored cocktail. And so some of you are probably wondering if I feel like I missed out on anything by not having a phone, and to be honest, minus a few awkward occasions, no. Remember, until I got my iPhone 6, which I used by the way until it disintegrated, I didn't have any phone, so it's not like I knew what it was like to have a phone, smartphone or not. But the bigger picture of this was that at some point in my life, I was adapted to nature. You could have probably put me in a cage and dropped me in a jungle, and I would have died an hour later than everyone else. And one of the abilities that I have lost ever since getting a smartphone is my sense of direction. You see, these days I kind of use Google Maps for everything. Going to a friend's house, Google Maps. Going to a restaurant I've been 20 times already, Google Maps. Going to my laundry machine, Google Maps. But there was a time when I would actually memorize street names and landmarks because if I didn't, I might end up in an alley and get diddled. And there was GPS at the time, but it was like one of those blocky things that you place in your car and was not practical to carry around. And don't get me wrong, you can obviously still memorize landmarks and street names when you do have a phone, but why would you waste your brain power doing so when you can just follow the blue line on whatever navigation app you're using and then use the remaining brain power to think about sad and painful memories? And so if you ever meet me in person, please do not ask me what highway or street I took to get to you, because I'm going to look at you until you say, the I-9, and I'm going to agree with whatever the hell you just said, even if it's across the country. It makes absolutely no sense because I don't fucking know. And speaking of not knowing, when you don't have a phone on you, people have no idea where the hell you are half the time, nor do you have any idea where they are half the time. I used to give out, other than my Yahoo email, a Google Docs link or my family's home phone to communicate with people, and while it was better than having to send out messenger pigeons, remember that I could only access my email or Google Docs when I had a Chromebook or a desktop nearby, which you can imagine isn't really that portable unless you're wearing a backpack, and a home phone only worked if you were home. But the other downside is that if you had some private conversations to be had, home phones could be intercepted quite literally by someone secretly listening to you on another phone in the house if they picked it up the same time you did. And because of that, when I planned on doing something a tad bit devious, I would physically find the person in a place I knew there would most likely or almost certainly be be like a classroom, and then we would agree on a time and location, which then I would write it down on a piece of paper and hope to God that that person didn't forget later that day. And yes, there were also payphones I could have used to communicate. My middle and high school actually had phones that looked like payphones and functioned the exact same way, but you didn't have to actually pay for them. But I'm also pretty sure those were monitored, so you can't just start saying crazy shit while using them. As for payphones, I used to carry around a pocket full of quarters so that in an emergency I could call my parents or whoever I needed to call. However, I hate carrying around coins to the point where I contemplated drilling holes into them and running a string through them, ancient Chinese style, to wear them as a bracelet or necklace so that those little shits won't go flying out of my pockets when I sat down or when I was trying to run. And so while not having a smartphone can make communication inconvenient or have some awkward encounters, these things are all fairly minor changes from before to after having a phone. Sure, you may not have to memorize street signs anymore, but it's not like the world was chaos before GPS was invented. It's sort of like a pick your poison kind of deal. The biggest changes from life before and after getting a smartphone are: number 1, dead space; 2, social interactions; and 3, safety. And so let's start with number 1, dead space. In your day-to-day life, there are moments when you are most likely alone and not doing anything, standing in line at a grocery store, waiting at a doctor's office, etc., etc. These moments are what I call dead space. There are moments in your life that are necessary for everyday functions, but uneventful. Now, these days in moments of dead space, you would usually whip out your phone and you start watching YouTube videos, scrolling TikTok, or whatever you prefer to do on your phone. Hey, I do it too. But I remember distinctly before I had a phone that there were moments where you literally had to rely on nothing but your imagination for entertainment. No smartphone means no music, no media, no games. You are quite literally raw dogging life. If you're standing in line at a grocery store and have no phone, sure, you can start chatting up some strangers, but that option isn't always there, especially when you're a kid and trying to avoid the unsolved mysteries ending. So you have periods of time, depending on what you're doing, that can quite literally span for hours where you have nothing but your thoughts, imagination, and silence. In these moments, I would be deep in my thoughts trying to pass the time and start coming up with some crazy ass scenarios, like what I would do to escape the building if the cash registers blew up and a big fire broke out, or how would I hypothetically sneak away with snacks next to the cashier's table, or how long I could survive in the grocery store if I was forgotten and left in the store like in Home Alone. I would also be really observant and start noticing the chewing gum stuck underneath a shelf, or maybe if the cashier was right or left-handed. Not in a creepy way, I should add. It's more so in a passive observant way to pass the time. But anyways, the point is that during this period of time, before I had a phone, my observation and imagination were crazy sharp. And sure, I was a kid, and what kid doesn't have a vivid imagination? More specifically, I mean that since there were periods of time where I was forced to confront the voices in my head with no distractions, I was able to really take in the environment around me, whereas now I'm either listening to a video or maybe some music while walking around and doing errands, or staring at my phone when there's time to kill. And because of all that, I really haven't had the same immersion in my everyday environment that I used to. On the other hand, dead space in car rides or planes back then meant that while you didn't have a phone to watch YouTube videos on, you could usually bring some kind of book to keep yourself entertained. And while I still enjoy reading now, I remember reading the Percy Jackson series or Harry Potter, and it being just so much more vivid back then, as books were the best way for a portable entertainment other than obviously a phone, so you constantly had one lying around. It also meant that constant reading trained your brain to better process and visualize what you're reading. Reading being more vivid could also again be because I was a kid at the time. I just feel like reading a book when you had no access to a phone made books more immersive than it feels now. And so dead space is now, in 2026, almost completely gone from my life, and I'm guessing many of your lives too, but obviously I can't speak on that. I cannot remember the last time I went over an hour of literally not doing anything but fighting the voices in my head. I guess other than when I was sleeping. And speaking of voices, albeit externally, let's talk about number 2, social interactions. When you have a room full of people with no phones on them, them, it also means that A, you can't whip out the weather app when things get awkward, but also B, you have much more people immersed in the activities and conversations around you. Of course, card games and board games still exist, and they're still being played to this day. What I mean by that is, since people didn't have a phone on them, they had no choice but to lock in. There is no whipping out your phone while waiting for your turn between poker hands. Everyone is invested. I really miss that. These days it seems like, and maybe I'm just with the wrong group of friends for board and card games, but when it comes time to do some kind of social activity around those subjects, it seems like people are half invested and scrolling on their phones half the time, only somewhat paying attention when it's their turn. Speaking of fun activities, does anyone else remember the crazy ass activities and games we would do outside? I'm not saying kids don't play outside anymore either, right? But I feel like I see less of it now. But I'm also not watching kids in my free time. Like I want to make that clear. Ghost in the Graveyard was by far one of the most fun outdoor activities I remember playing with friends. Usually we would pick a dark night and some forest and play this simple game where the ghost, the person who was it, and sometimes there was more than one, would close their eyes and count to 10 while everyone else had to run and hide, and then the ghost would try to chase down everyone else while everyone else was trying to get to the safe point. That shit was so much fun. I remember flying through a forest and wiping out on a route while playing Ghost in the Graveyard, and it was one of my core memories. And while a bunch of adults playing this game would not be socially acceptable, I don't know, I just miss the random moments where everybody just felt like they were dedicated to whatever was actually happening around them. And again, I know I sound old as hell for saying that, but I don't mean that in like a dismissive way. I don't know how to say. Anyways, moving on, alright? This leads to my final noticeable change in my daily life after getting a phone. Number 3. Safety. I could not imagine going through my day-to-day life without my smartphone anymore for this primary reason. Beyond being able to readily take pictures, scroll social media, or browse the internet, which are obviously notable features of having a smartphone, the major change is that now you have a way of near instant communication if you need help, alongside methods of problem solving. When I was 13 years old, I was running on a trail maybe 3-4 miles away from my home when I fell and sprained my ankle and scraped up my knee. It was so bad, in fact, that I actually thought I had broken it at the time. Now, I didn't have a phone on me, and sometimes there were people running in this trail, but since it was winter time and around sunset, it was pretty rare to see people on this trail at this time. So I was essentially 3 to 4 miles away from my home with an injured ankle in the middle of a Chicagoland winter that was quickly approaching night. I remember just feeling helpless as I hobbled back to my house as the temperature was quickly dropping. And keep in mind, I was dressed in relatively light clothing because I was doing some long distance running, so it's not like I had a big winter coat on me. And other than lighting a tree on fire for a smoke signal, there was quite literally no way for me to communicate with anyone else. And that feeling is terrifying. So that's the thing. Having a phone isn't just to keep yourself entertained, it is also a lifeline to contact others in an emergency alongside helping you problem solve. If your car got a flat, you can whip out your smartphone to watch a YouTube tutorial on how to change out the tire, assuming you have the tools. If you're contemplating eating a strange berry in a forest, you can ask ChatGPT to identify the berry, only for it to be wrong and you end up dead. The point is that with a phone, you have options. You have tools for problem solving and ways to immediately get answers to your questions. If you get lost, you can use GPS or call for help. If you get hungry, you can look for restaurants near you. To not have a phone on you after so many years of having one, it feels like you're almost naked, or at least missing some big part of your outfit. So while I miss many parts of life where people didn't have a smartphone on them at all times, I've also studied enough history to know that you cannot stifle the waves of technology, at least not without the world moving on without you. And so while this video is just my own memories of a bygone era, I suggest anyone else who remembers this era to also make their own video talking about it. Hey, why not? Maybe it can also be an idea for your first YouTube video if you haven't posted already. And with that being said, Happy New Year's to everyone watching this. I truly wish all your wishes and goals come true this year. And of course, thank you so much for watching my video and making it to the end. Please also leave a like and subscribe if you wish, as it would really mean a lot to me. And most of all, thank you again.